Amendment, and I have reminded them that the DHS agents who wrote this report have the right to write their own search warrants and serve those on your computer server and capture all your keystrokes, your telephone company, and capture all your phone calls. And they say to me, well, where did they get this power from? And the answer is from the Patriot Act, which the Bush administration and many, many conservative Republicans supported when their guy was in power and decided how it was going to be used. Will the chickens come home to roost?
Well, I certainly hope so. One thing that struck me about the DHS report was the paranoia. I mean, it's funny, the government, the politicians warn about, right-wing paranoids, but the government itself comes across as paranoid, and it was government paranoia that paved the route to both Ruby Ridge and Waco, because you had incredible government overreactions in both those cases, and that is what fomented much of the distrust of the federal government over the last 15 years. And the government is doing it again. The government appears to have learned nothing from its earlier overreaching, and it's funny to see the paranoia that simply because someone thinks the government's violating the Constitution, that person practically becomes a public enemy. But the government has violated the Constitution. These torture memos prove it.
Jim Bovard, who's the author of many, many great books on government excess, the most recent of which is Attention Deficit to Democracy. It's always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us. We hope you can come back at 2 o'clock Eastern on Wednesdays to continue your conversation with us here on Freedom Watch.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Jim. In a couple of minutes, my colleague Shelley Roche will be here. She, of course, has been receiving your, I think I'm saying this right, your tweets on Twitter, where you have been twittering her and telling her what it is you want us to talk about and what questions you specifically would like to have answered. There's a little bit of technology here, so in a couple of seconds, Shelley will pop up as we press the buttons that we need to press. I think we're ready to press those buttons, and there she is. The good Shelley Roche is here. Shelley,
how are you?
What would Wednesday be without you? Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Thanks for having me back.
What do you have for us? What are our wonderful listeners and viewers interested in talking about before we sign off?
Boy, we have some great feedback this week. Let me just read a few of the comments. So regarding torture, from Peace Chicken, they say, totally agree with Shep, don't dare torture in my name or America's. Scott Beezer says, the America I want to live in doesn't torture. The Red Owl says, he's right though, we didn't form America to be like other countries. Torture isn't American and very unconstitutional. And I have kind of a different view from Rollins Wallace, who's saying, depends on the definition. I would rule out the Rack and Iron Maiden, but if it saves lives without killing, why not press on?
It's interesting, Shelley, how whether you're in favor of torture or against it, and I don't know how any American could be in favor of it, it comes down to what Orwell told us and the power of words. If you change the definition of a word, it's amazing what you can get away with. Judge Bybee, then J. Bybee, when he wrote these memos, said the pain has to be a near occasion of death for it to be torture. Now, if you accept that as the definition, then anything that keeps you alive, anything short of death, is not torture, and the government, notwithstanding the laws it's enacted, notwithstanding the treaties we've joined, notwithstanding the oath to uphold the Constitution, can get away with anything it wants. I'm sure your good tweeters understand that.
Yeah, and it's just unbelievable that this is happening, and the way it makes us look to other countries too. I have a tweet from Freezem, who says, as a European, I would say, you are America, you should not torture, but you did, and you lost some of your appeal.
You have to, any tweets for me, any questions that people would like me to weigh in on?
Yeah, we're, let's see, so, some of the people are saying that, what can the Liberty Movement do to enact political objectives when the two-party system has been so unresponsive? I'm getting a number of questions kind of asking your perspective on where do we go from here in light of all of these things that are happening.
We really need independent people to run for the Congress. We have to radically restructure the two-party system, the corruption that it has brought, the continuation of the same people in the government. If we don't get our hands on that, then our destiny is doomed. Because when you talk about things like the Patriot Act, when you talk about things like torture, when you talk about things like the DHS report, there's very, very little difference between Republicans and Democrats. People who believe that because the individual has an immortal soul, the individual is greater than the state. People who believe that we have natural rights that the government cannot take away. People who take seriously the idea, goes all the way back to Jefferson, that the Constitution chains down the government and prevents it from doing things that violate its own terms and violate our natural rights. People like that have to get in the government. Shelley, would you join us next week with more of these?
I'd love to. Before
I let you go, what's your favorite one on there?
Oh, my favorite tweet?
Yes.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so, well, let's look at this one. Regular Ron says, watching Freedom Watch on FoxNews.com, making me rather sick. What the hell is a Border Patrol checkpoint doing 100 miles inside the U.S.? And another unrelated one from Kid Bry. As the mainstream news director, I would simply like to thank all of them for providing me with new courage. So, you know, the message is getting out there, and people are inspired by what you're doing, Judge, and they're just trying to say thank you for bringing the show.
Where can folks get to you? BreakTheMatrix.com?
Yep, BreakTheMatrix.com or on Twitter.
Shelley, thanks very much. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks.
All right, it's almost 2:59 in the East Coast, meaning the handsomest guy at Fox gets to take the seat over from me.
Judge, I can't take that title from you, sir.
Always a pleasure. Glad your hand is better and that cast is gone. Here's what startled me this morning in your end of the world, and I don't know if it startled you, and that is Tim Geithner saying to the banks, you want to get out of TARP? You also own Chrysler bonds? Get rid of those bonds for 15 cents on the dollar. Is that coercion or what?
That testimony today had so many nuggets that we're going to pull apart in the next hour. One of them, yeah, sure. Interestingly, today, GM came out and said, bondholders, all you debt holders, no payment June 1st. $1 billion they were expecting to get.
It's the first time GM hasn't paid on a bond.
They're not going to perform on that bond.
And the government's going to go along with it. The government will probably say, GM bondholders, switch your bonds for some worthless GM
stock. Exactly, Judge.
Always a pleasure. Thank you very much for watching Freedom Watch. Until next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern and 11 in the morning on the West Coast. Stay free.